This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Rauta back with episode 108 of A Geek Leader podcast. And today on the show, we've got Tom Schwab. We talk about how to market yourself, how to be a little bit more proactive at getting your name out in the community. And I've seen some companies where some of their criteria for promotion once you get to a certain level is how well you're known outside of your own company. So like how well are you known in the industry? Do you speak at conferences? Do you are you on podcasts? Do you have a name for yourself? And that's one of the reasons why starting the Geek Leader, happened for me, is because I wanted to be more known in the community. I wanted to be a better speaker. I wanted to be able to be more comfortable talking, and I also wanted to talk to really cool guests and get to know people and build my network that way. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how to get on shows. We're going to talk about how to break through the noise that's out there, how to be an expert. And overall, it's a great talk. So with all that being said, give it up for Tom Schwab.
Yeah, well, I always say I was trained as an engineer. My undergrad's in mechanical engineering. My first job out of college was running nuclear power plants in the surface Navy. So that taught me how to think, how to analyze problems. But the Navy was not the life that I wanted. I give great credit to the people that do it, and even more credit to the families with the stress that puts on. But got out of the service after my 4 years at the academy and then 5 years active duty. Went and worked in corporate America for a Fortune 500 medical device company. Another safe route, another safe job. Did the engineering, then operations, sales, and marketing, and then had the opportunity to start my own business. And I really love that.
Definitely want to say thank you for your service. Just interrupt a little bit. I know today is actually while we're recording this, is the 75th anniversary of D-Day, which is kind of a cool thing. But thank you for your service. I always want to say that to the veterans that come on the show, and the folks that I've had on in the military. My dad was a veteran. It's one of those things that I'm, super thankful for all that you guys do. Even if you're, only were in there for 5 years. That's 5 years is a long time. So thank you for your service, and we definitely appreciate that.
Well, John, I thank you for that, and I always thank people for paying for my college education, because that was one of the greatest things that got me out of being just a Midwest kid that never been more than 100 miles from his home to really seeing the world and opening my eyes.
Yeah. Well, sorry I interrupted you before, but you were talking about how you moved into sales and operations, and so I'll let you continue.
Yeah, and it was interesting. It's your life only makes sense looking backwards, but going from one place to another, I was always using those, the geek talents, the engineering mindset to do things differently. I was told that engineers can't sell, especially in the medical device field. Well, I proved them wrong on that, and maybe I couldn't sell like the other people, but I could sell my way, and it did very, very well. So same way, then I started a company. It was an e-commerce company, direct-to-patient durable medical equipment. And man, I loved that. I think that first few years in there, I learned more than I had since nuclear power school. It was like drinking from a fire hose, all the things that were out there. And I love to learn. I love to read. And there's so many things out there now where people want to help you. So I built that company up, built it up from a regional player to a national leader, sold it off. And the way we built it up was using inbound marketing, which is a term that was first used by two smart guys out of MIT, Dharmesh Saw and Brian Halligan. They wrote a book about it and then launched a company called HubSpot. And really, it's used, the whole idea of using content to attract, engage, and delight people. And content used to be blogs. And in 2014, I hypothesized that you could start to use podcasts, and specifically podcast interviews, as that content. In the same way we used to use guest blogs, and instead of putting up a blog on my site and getting it seen by three people, one of them being my mom, better to put it up on, Washington Post, Huffington Post, Wall Street Journal, some big paper where people could see it. And so that's what we started to do with podcast interviews. I'm an engineer at heart, so we tested it, we refined it. At first, when I saw the results and it converted 25 times better than blogs, I thought, no, this couldn't be right. It's got to be a niche. It's got to be a personality. But we really tested it, refined it, understood it. Then we started to teach it. And what people told us is, I understand it. You've given me the cookbook, you've given me the videos, but I just want to be the guest. I want you to take care of the rest. So that's what launched Interview Valet in 2014. And we have grown to a company of 14 that serve over 90 clients.
Wow, that's awesome. That's an awesome story. And I think you're absolutely right when it comes to podcasts. I found that podcast has really hurt me in the ability to understand what new music is out there, because most of my commutes are now listening to podcasts and no longer radio. And also when it comes to like, what you mentioned with guest posts and things like that, I found myself reading a lot less. It's either an audiobook or a podcast for the most part. And audio has really become kind of the way that I consume most of my content these days.
And I think we live in an amazing time, John, because you can produce in the way that you want and consume in the way the people want. So for me, I've written a lot of blogs in my life, but every one felt like a homework assignment. But to speak, that's easy. So we can, we're just talking here. It's fun. We can transcribe that, clean it up, and put it into blogs. We could put some B-roll footage over it and now make a video. So I'm like you. Sometimes I feel like I'm lying when I tell people that I read 2 to 3 books a week, when the truth is I'm probably listening to two or three books a week, and I'm listening at 2x speed while I'm doing other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And also when you think about like all the extra data that's involved in audio versus text, like in text is hard to show vocal tonality or inflection or excitement in someone's voice or the speed, as they ramp up their talking and get talking faster and faster and faster because they're excited, or they slow down because they're a little unsure about what they're saying. You can't really convey that when you're reading text, but you can hear it for sure.
And for me, I can listen faster than I can read. So for me, my mind tends to wander. So if I'm listening to a book at 1x speed, my mind will start to wander. But if I crank that up to 2 or 2.5, then I have to focus on the words. And to me, it's the best. I learn more and I learn it quicker.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's painful to listen to something at 1x nowadays.
Although I have to say it's weird talking to you and hearing you at 1x speed, because most of the time I'm used to listening to you on the podcast at like 2x speed as I run at half x speed.
Yeah, I'm the exact same way. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, when I hear myself talk, I feel like, man, am I drunk or something? Why am I so slow? Oh yeah, that's for sure. And you were talking about like the time that we live in, and I think it's amazing. And I was talking to someone just the other day about how lucky we are, both to be in technology, where I the field that my listeners are in, and I'm in today. That the unemployment rate's really low for technology. We're really lucky to be in there, but also the fact that when my grandparents were growing up, they didn't have running water in their house. There was no concept of being able to communicate overseas without writing a letter and waiting, a month or two for that letter to get delivered. And today I can FaceTime someone in Europe, instantly, or in Australia even. It's just crazy where we're at when it comes to technology.
It's, there's a lot of problems in the world, but there's no better time to be alive. And I've got to remind myself that because, for me, a bad day is when I lose internet for an hour. The world ends because of that. And, a bad day for my grandfather was when he buried a child. And I'm like, I'll take the problems we have today. And especially there's so many people that just want to help you. Today, if you're isolated or ignorant, as long as you've got internet, if you're that way, it's largely by choice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And honestly, if you just go back, a decade, one of the things that I want to talk to you about is, marketing yourself and kind of making a name for yourself outside of your company to better your career and help you out. And that's one of the things that software developers, somewhat, some people are really good at it and some people struggle at it, partly because they're introverted. They're not really sure how to make a name for themselves. They're really good at writing their code, but they're not sure what else to do. And, 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, when I was, writing code and developing and working in that environment, if I wanted to make a name for myself outside, I had to find meetups or find groups to go to and physically be there and travel to conferences and meet people and talk. And that's still a great way to network and great way to meet people. But there's newer ways and faster ways and better ways to reach an even broader audience and larger audience. And I think podcasting is one of those ways. And what are some tips and things that you've learned about how people can make a name for themselves outside of their own company?
Well, yeah. And I really think today, the biggest problem we all have is obscurity, right? There's an abundance of choices, an abundance of calories, an abundance of customers. And that could be a customer for your own business or a customer that's an employer that wants to hire you. But the biggest problem is they don't know you exist, right? They're obscure. So the question is how do you get known? And a lot of people talk about how do you break through the noise? And honestly, I think that's almost laughable today. The idea that I'm going to break through the noise over Coke, Procter and Gamble, all these other big companies. I think honestly, I'm probably just adding to the noise. So what I've always looked at is how do I get in on the conversation? So I'm more of on the introvert scale. So if I go to a big conference, I'm not the one that goes in the middle of the group and starts talking to people, but I'll find somebody that I know. And how can I get in on the conversation with the group that they're talking there? And so I think really that's sort of like what you try to do. So, our grandparents maybe did it at the country club, right? Go there, get introduced by someone else. I think we can do it by getting introduced by other influencers. So that could be getting invited onto a stage to give a physical presentation. It could be in being invited to a digital stage and like a podcast interview here where there's that transfer of authority. It could even be going out and putting up content. If you've got a larger following right now, you could go ahead and put out videos or audios or whatever is the easiest way for you to put that content out. But for me, I've always liked to leverage other people's audiences. So even at a conference, John, if I see you, if I see a friendly face, I'm going to go up and talk to you. And, I'll introduce you to my friends and you can introduce me to your friends.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Leveraging someone else's audience is honestly a lot easier than trying to build your own. As I've found out with the podcast, it took, a lot of episodes before, you really got a substantial amount of listeners or people listening to you. And if you could just go to someone else who's already done that and get your voice heard that way, that's a much easier way and a faster way, I think, to build that rapport.
Yeah, and people will always ask me, like, when am I going to start my own podcast? And I've been on over 1,200 podcast interviews. I was sort of the crash test dummy as we were testing everything out. But I look at it and say, doing a podcast is tough. Anybody that says it's easy has never done it or never done it well. And John, my hat's off to you. I know there's a lot of work that goes into it. So I always look at it and say, how can I get the greatest efficiency, the greatest feedback, the greatest return on investment? So yeah, I could start my own physical conference and invite other people there, but boy, that's tough. Or I could get invited to that conference to speak. I could start my own podcast or get invited to speak on other people's podcasts. And I think if there's anything that geeks and engineers know is how to hack something to get the maximum out with putting the minimum in.
Yeah. So let's say I am I'm a development manager and I'm kind of wanting to grow my career. I want to kind of be known outside of my company. And I've actually seen some businesses around the Charlotte, North Carolina area where I'm at that have actually put into different levels of, like, if you wanted to be a principal developer or staff developer, then one of the things you have to have is to be known outside in the tech community, outside of the company. How is it that I could get onto a podcast or make myself known or find, a place where I could get out there? What are some of the steps and tips that you have for developers or engineers that want to get in that role?
Yeah, and I think the first thing is getting out of your own way. I know a lot of people struggle with this. I struggle with the beginning, and they're like, well, I'm not the expert. Well, there's no the expert, right? Well, the only thing that I'm the undisputed expert on is my opinion, but I'm an expert in the things that I work in, the things that I study. If you look at the legal definition of an expert, it's someone who knows more by their training, their education, their experience than the average person. So when somebody comes up on the legal stand, they're not the undisputed expert in this, but they are an expert. So I think the first thing is realizing what's ordinary to you is amazing to other people, and to start to share that. And, there's Gary Vaynerchuk is out there and he always talks about, jab, 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 right hook. And I think I missed a couple jabs in there, but I look at it as serve, 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 ask. So if you reach out to John and say, John, I want to get on your podcast because I need to get known so I can get promoted. Or if you go to somebody that's got a physical stage and you say, yeah, this is a box I need to check off to talk here. Well, that's self-serving. And you're probably not going to get a good response with that. And especially nobody likes a cold call. So first start thinking about, geez, what could I do in order for it not to be a cold call? So with that, if you want to get on a podcast, listen to the podcast, see if you'd be a good fit for it. Leave a rating and review. That's sort of that give. Make some comments, share it on social media, more give. Then when you reach out to the host, say, hey, I appreciate the podcast. I liked these episodes. Here's something that I think I could help your audience with. Always giving. And, if you give long enough, they're going to ask you, hey, can you be on the podcast? They'll ask you, hey, can I work with you? They'll ask you, hey, what would it take for you to leave your current job and come work with us? So if you always look on that serving side, and I think once again, in this time we live on, that paradigm of more than ever, I think that those people that give freely and share what they know are the ones that really get noticed. So as an engineer, developer, you may know just as much as another 100 people out there that are being considered for a position. But if you're the one that's out there publicly talking about it, you're going to be seen as the expert. The other thing, too, is that you think about it. Today with the internet, we interview people before we actually meet them. So, before John and I even talked, I was listening to the podcast interviews, went to his website, went to the LinkedIn, and, today you are what I find on the internet. So if I go on the internet and it's just, pictures of frat parties, well, that's the decisions they're going to make. But if there's some YouTube videos up there of somebody explaining something, if they're speaking at a conference, even if they're doing a face-to-camera video, it's like, oh, okay, I see them, I know them. And from that standpoint, making sure that when they find you out there in any way, that it's intentional and that they find what you want them to find.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about being out there and people seeing you as you are on the internet is huge. But also want to go back to what you said about the Gary Vaynerchuk. And I'm a big fan of Gary. Actually, one of the rare professors. I teach at Winthrop University part time, and in one of my courses, I actually had the one of his books. I can't remember which one it was now. Crush It as a required reading for the course, just to give people an idea that you're looking for a job when you graduate here, but don't just go out there and ask for a job. Go to the company and say, hey, here's some things that I can do for you. Here's some benefits that I have, and here's some things I've already started doing to help you guys out. I had a guest not too long ago. He's a guy that I've never heard of before until this guest. He was a software engineer that recently started a podcast. And just so people know that are listening, I probably get at least one request a day on average, probably 7 or 8 a week to come on the show. And I can't have that many people when I only do a show once a week. So there's a lot more no's than yeses that come in. But this guy sent me an email talking about, I really liked what this guest said from you. I liked what this guest said from you. I just left you this rating and review. By the way, I've started this podcast. I don't know if it's a good fit for your listeners, but check it out. And if it is, I'd love to come on and talk about it. I listened to a show. I thought, maybe he would be a good guest because of this reason and that reason. So we conversed back and forth, and bada bing, bada boom, he's on the show.
And you think about it, if you're talking about the show, a physical stage, what do people want on there? As a podcast host, there's 3 types of people that you have on the show. There's your friends of friends, and people that you want to be friends. Nowhere in there does it say a cold pitch. And I probably get pitched once or twice a day to be on my podcast, and everyone is the same. Dear Tom, we love your podcast and would love to be a guest. Well, the only problem with that, John, is I don't have a podcast. Right? If you're gonna lie to me, tell me I'm pretty. Do something like that. But you can tell people there are just not authentic. They're not giving. So with that, try to build a relationship. It really helps with that. Yes, when they've got lots of people to choose from, they're going to choose those people they know, like, and trust, even if it's at a small level.
Yeah, and the same thing, goes true or holds true when it comes to if you're just looking for a different job. You know, look at the company, find out some things that maybe you've, hit their GitHub up, check out their website if you're a web developer, figure out things that you can do to improve their current situation, offer those suggestions to them, build that relationship first before you even apply.
Because then you look at it, you come to it as a partner, right? As a fellow professional, and saying, hey, this is what I can offer you. This is how I can help you. You're not asking for a job or asking to be on their stage as much as, hey, I can help you. Let's work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that gets into those jabs, you got to give. Yeah. What are some other things that, that folks can do to kind of build that relationship? Like you mentioned reviews and comments and talking about the show. What are some other things maybe through social media that people could do that might, engage with the podcast host, the conference, director or speaker committee or whatever?
And a lot of times we think, oh, it's got to be scalable. Bigger is better. How can I reach out to 10,000 people? I could write a program for that. I could automate it. I could do all of that. Well, those are the kind of emails that I'm getting, right? Just the canned ones. And I think today in this, digital age of automation, often it's the personal touch that sets you apart. And with that, there's some great technology out there. Video pitches work great. Now, none of us like, maybe not. Maybe there's some people that like the way they look on video, or some people that like the way they sound. We just have to get over that. It's who we are. It's how the world sees us. But doing things like video pitches, is wonderful. Just grab your iPhone, and instead of sending a text message, just hit the video and give a little response there and reach out to them. All of our studies have shown that converts better. On emails, you can use something like Loom and just do a little video with that also. And that way they get to see your face, build that relationship. And you can put all the words below that, but it's really an easy way to stand out. And I guess that's the biggest thing that I always focus on is, how can I build a relationship? Because today, with automation, it's never been easier to make a transaction, right? It's really easy to get another 1,000 people to connect on LinkedIn, but they're probably not the 1,000 people that you want. What you really want is the relationship. So from that, don't focus on just the transaction, focus on the lifetime value. So with that, you just need better relationships, not just more relationships. So make sure that you follow up with those, and even look who that already knows them. There's nothing better than a warm introduction. And really, if you think about it, that's what podcast interviews are. If you're listening to me right now, you have no idea who Tom Schwab is. You've never seen the website, but you know who John is. You know who the Geek Leader podcast is. So with that, there's that transfer of authority. So always look how you can leverage that, but then also how you can help other people leverage the community and the relationships that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was an article written by Kevin Kelly a long time ago called 1,000 True Fans. And
yes.
He kind of gets into that point about how it doesn't matter if you have like an audience of 1 million, if you don't connect with those folks. And if you can connect with just 1,000, you make a much bigger difference. And it's so much easier, in my opinion, to connect with someone when you hear their voice. You almost feel like you know them, like, I listen to some podcasts as well. And one of the shows I listen to is the Joe Rogan Show. And I've never met Joe Rogan. I probably never will meet Joe Rogan, but I feel like I know the guy because, when you hear someone talk for 3 hours, at a time, you kind of get to know a little bit about the things that they like, they dislike, their opinions. And when you come on a show with someone and you get to just be yourself and just to talk, people get to know you. I think a lot of my listeners know me. I had one listener send me something not too long ago, and it was kind of like right up my alley, just something that I would be excited about. It was just a Raspberry Pi thing, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. But because he got to know me just by listening to me.
It's interesting. Sometimes you meet somebody for the first time in real life. Like if you met Joe Rogan, your first inclination would be to, go up and shake his hand, give him a hug, whatever, because you feel like you're a friend with him. And he'd be looking at you and going, who the heck are you?
Yeah,
or if you had, or if you had if you had a discussion with them, You'd be asking him specific questions. Hey, how's this going in your life? How's that going in your life? And he doesn't even know who you are. It's that way too. Sometimes when we get leads from podcast interviews, if somebody listens to you for 30 or 45 minutes and they're like, well, yeah, Tom, I like him. I like what he's doing. He works with people like me. He gets some great results. I want to hire him. Well, you get on that first sales call and they know everything about you and you know nothing about them. So it's a little bit interesting from that standpoint, but it's always, we work with people we know, like, trust, and remember, and you've got to figure out a way to get that. And the other thing too is, I think the higher you go in the pyramid, the fewer relationships really matter, right? So if you're selling a $1.99 widget or an entry level job, yeah, maybe you need lots and lots and lots of fans or connections. But if you look at somebody that's like, going to be the chief technology officer or the CIO of a big company, there's probably 10, 20, maybe 50 people that are making that decision. They might go through a headhunter, but they're also going through friends of friends. Hey, who should we get for this? And so at that point, I think the higher you go, the more the relationships matter and the deeper the relationships matter.
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely matter a lot deeper. I know, like, if I'm going to buy, iPhone charger cables, I just go online and buy them. I don't need to have a relationship with the vendor that makes those charging cables. But if I'm going to buy a new SAN, I want to spend, a couple $100,000. I want to know who I'm buying this from. And it's kind of like business to business isn't really business to business. It's kind of like it's a person within a business to a person within a business.
Yeah, a great example of that is Acuity Scheduling. Gavin Zuklinski, a programmer, he started this business. And the reason he started it was because his mom was having scheduling problems at her office. And he's like, oh, I can figure something out with that. So he started to work out all the different things, and then other people asked for him. And that's how he built up the company. Well, when he first started his company, he used a lot of podcast interviews to get out there, talk to small business owners and entrepreneurs, to get them to sign up for the monthly recurring revenue, the software as a service. Well, his churn rate was lower than other people in the industry, because I think part of it was that he was like the only person that you knew the story behind it. Schedule Once, Calendly, all of those are great programs, but I really don't know the story behind it. And it's funny because he was the first acquisition that Squarespace did. What was that? In the spring of 2019. So I think there's something there about people knowing who they're working with. Even HubSpot years ago did a study, and they said that the about the founder page with Dharmesh and Brian was highly indicative of people signing up for the product or the service, because at the end of the day, it can be a great product, but people want to know what the heart of it is behind there too. They want to know what the story is.
Mm-hmm. I had someone on from HubSpot probably over a year ago now, but we talked a lot about culture and the fact that getting to know what the business is about, kind of let them see your culture. And that's kind of one of the things that helps drive a business is when they open up the doors and kind of let people know, here's what our culture is like here. That makes hiring easier. That makes people want to buy from them. That makes people feel more like they're a part of that company, even when they're just a customer.
And even going back to the relationships there, the expertise, it's so hard to judge now, right? If somebody came up and said, I'm the best lawyer, well, it's either he or the other million lawyers out there is lying. Same way, if somebody said, I'm the best developer, well, either he or the other million are lying there. But if John pulls me aside and says, this is the guy that you need for this project, well, that really makes them stand out. And it's that transfer of authority. And the best developer in the world might be sitting in a cubicle, and I'll never hire him because I don't know who he is. So from that standpoint, and I'll judge by what other people tell me that I trust.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, whenever I'm hiring someone, I'll definitely look around and see, what articles they're sharing on LinkedIn and what are they doing there. And if they do have like an interview where they've posted where somebody interviewed them and they were on a YouTube video or on a podcast somewhere, I'll definitely listen to that. And I can almost tell before I even really interview them in person if this person is going to be a fit or not, just based on what they've done outside of that interview.
Yeah, when we have our initial discovery calls with potential new clients, we always look at three things: message, market, and machine. And those three things multiply on each other to actually give you results with podcast interview marketing. And, the message is, do they have stories to tell? Are they interested in being interesting? Do they just want to, do an infomercial? So that's the message. The market is, do they know who they want to talk to? And then the final one is the machine. And if you hear somebody on a podcast interview, if you hear even them from the stage, what are you going to do? You're going to go back to their website. You're going to go to their social media. And if they look like their website was built in Y2K, or, social media makes them look like they're in the witness protection plan, it's never going to convert well. So I think it's an all of the above, making sure that you've got that presence.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to talk a little bit about how you got started with Interview Valet and what the early days was like and how you scaled that. Because one of the things that I see that a lot of leaders, especially in technology, struggle with is scaling. And, when you first become a manager, you almost feel like you have to micromanage, and they're not able to scale because of that. What are some of the things that you encountered as you were growing the business and starting the business that you were able to overcome?
And this business has been like no other one that I've done before, John, because it's being more of a service-based business than a product-based business or even a machine. It was more like raising a child than it was just building a business. So when I was in e-commerce, it was really easy, build it, have the product there, and then just keep adding more and more traffic to it. So it was very easy to scale it from that standpoint. When you have more of a human interaction with it, and that's what we wanted. We didn't want just a cold automated thing. Then you've got to find the right people. You've got to train them. And part of the thing is, and early on, somebody told me that it was like raising a child. And so early on, you have to do everything for them. And then you'll see them starting to take their first steps, and you need to support them and nurture them and grow them. And in some ways, it's gotten to the point now where, they're the teenagers that are asking for the keys, and then just saying, hey, could you get out of the driveway so I can get on with what I need to do? And that can be tough for a lot of founders because they want to know everything. They want to do everything. They want to be the sage that everyone comes to. And when you do that, you'll limit the entire growth of the organization. And one of the things that I really had to struggle with early on is being a geek, being the engineer, being the smart guy in the room. I would often be the first one to answer questions. And I had a coach that really told me, count to 7 before you say anything. And often people would most often, they would come up with a better idea than I would. And even if it wasn't the exact idea, or I didn't think it was maybe as good as my idea, I would say, that's great. I think that will work. How can I support you? Because that would allow them to take ownership of it and grow it. So really, as you're looking to scale, you can't scale your work hours. We all have a limited amount of time. So I think you have to talk about leveraging. So how can you scale the impact that you're having by working through other people? The other thing too is, the bottleneck at any bottle is at the top. And you always have to remember that. And a lot of times I think I have a great idea. Or I'll get advice from someone else, a coach, somebody in my mastermind. And I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Well, no, that's an opinion, right? The only real answers come from your customers. And your customers are telling you every day what they love and what they loathe. And you got to make sure that you're not so tied into it that you don't miss the right answer. In the Navy, we used to joke, you have to be smart enough to know right answer when told. Well, it's the same thing in business. The customer is going to tell you what they love and what they loathe. and you got to do more of one and less of the other. And an example was when I started this out, I tested it for a while, and I'm like, I've got this down. I wrote a book. The book sold well. Then I'm like, I'm going to do a course. John, I never took the course out of beta because as I looked at the back end, I was seeing that people weren't making it through the course, or if they were, they weren't getting results. And I even threw in a couple of hours of consulting with it just to get feedback. And most people lied to me. They say, "Oh, the course is great. I got all the way through it, and I'm just waiting to start to implement it." And I'd look at the back end and going, "You got through chapter 1 of 6. Ask me for your money back. I'll give it to you." But the ones that were really honest are like, I understand this. You've given me the cookbook. You've given me the videos on how to do it. But I want to be the guest. You take care of all the rest. You be the chef. You make it. Just let me enjoy it. And so from that standpoint, I could have fought that and said that they were wrong. But I listened to them and said, if this is what they want, I need to listen to them. So every business plan, it looks perfect when it's put out there. All the graphs goes up and to the right. And most founders, when they tell their story, will tell it like it was a straight line. But I think in reality, it's just a continually pivoting, listening, and staying out of your way.
Yep, I think you're absolutely right. And, it's hard in hindsight to see all the different pivots that you went through, unless it's recent. Because our mind kind of goes back, and I guess the hindsight 2020 joke's going to be made a lot next year. It's 2020 coming up. But anyway, one of the things that you hit on that I kind of wanted to go back to, you kind of just briefly mentioned it. You mentioned your mastermind. And I want to ask you, how important is having a mastermind or having people around you, and maybe even tell the audience what is a mastermind? How important is that to holding you accountable and helping you build the business that you have?
Yeah, and to me, masterminds are vital. And I think the term originally came from, was it Dale Carnegie? You may know this.
How to influence,
how to win friends and influence people. Yeah. And he talked about, the Knights of the Round Table, or, Christ and his apostles, or Benjamin Franklin had a group called the Hutu that he would bring together. And the whole idea is to bring like-minded people together to share ideas, to share resources, to share perspectives. Because to me, that's what's most powerful. And it's probably the perspective part, right? Because we only see things through our eyes. We only have the experience that we have had. And when you bring people together that you trust, that trust you, that believe in you, they can shed things, shed different perspective on things that can help you achieve things faster, avoid problems. And also, I think most of the time our friends and our family want us to be happy. So they'll tell me the answer that makes me want to be happy. The people I've been in mastermind with, they want me to be better. And they'll call me out when I'm not doing something. They'll praise me when I am doing something, but they'll always challenging me on, hey, have you looked at it this way? And, masterminds used to be where you'd have to physically get together. And now with technology, our mastermind, we meet once a week on a Zoom call. I probably talk to the guys, once a week individually. And then twice a year, we just get together, in real life. And most of the time we see each other at different conferences and things like that.
How large of a group do you have?
The one I'm in is just 8 people. I was in one previously. I was actually a co-founder of it, and the other founder just wanted to keep getting it bigger and bigger and bigger. And to me, bigger is not better. Bigger is just bigger. So for me, I would rather get in a smaller mastermind. I think with 10 to 12 people is ideal. Because that way everybody gets their input. You've got enough different data points to look at, and you can really build relationships. If bigger is better, then let's have a mastermind at the next Super Bowl. It won't work.
Yeah, I agree. I think 10's at least about the limit that I could handle with a small group. Getting together and communicating. I think once you get more than that, people don't open up as much. The anxiety of a group being around for some of us introverts makes it a little bit more challenging when it gets too big.
Yeah, and I think Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers talked about that too. If it's too small, then it feels like one-on-one coaching, and if it's too big, it feels like a conference. And the thing is that it should never be, in my mind, group coaching. Everybody that comes to a mastermind comes there with something. So there might be one person that's leading it, but everybody is a participant. And the perspective. So I'm 53 years old, and oftentimes I'll have a question about someone else that's younger, an employee that's younger, and I might have somebody in the mastermind says, "Well, they may look at it this way," and it's like, "Wow, I never would have thought about that." And the whole idea is to surround yourself with great people. And that doesn't just mean people in front of you, right? So if you're surrounding yourself with great people, some of those could be in front of you, some of those could be peers next to you, and some of those could be behind you. And the thing is that in different roles, the positions could change. So they could be, as a developer, way, way ahead of me, but as a manager, I might be ahead of them, and even getting to the point of, I hate the term work-life balance. To me, that makes no historical sense. To me, it's work-life integration. So you might even have somebody that's ahead of you on relationships or family that can talk to you about, different things like that. So to me, the richness of your life is the richness of your relationships, and a mastermind has been a huge part of that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Just a great outlook about what a mastermind is and how important it is. And hopefully that'll encourage some of the people to, get involved and to find one. And if any listeners are out there need help finding one, reach out to me. I'll send you some information about how to connect with people. I think, definitely with technology, you can connect with people all over the world, but most cities have local meetups that are great places to start. I know where I'm at in Charlotte, Microsoft hosts a whole bunch of different sessions that are free for anybody to come to here. And, you can meet people and kind of start your own little group out of those. And it's just an easy way.
And anybody that's like in rural Southwest Michigan or a place like that just wishes they were in a cool city like Charlotte, well, there's still the internet, and you can hang out with cool people from Charlotte.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. You mentioned a couple of good books. I wanted to kind of end this with a book recommendation from you, because you mentioned two books that are in my Audible queue already that I've already listened to that are fantastic. Do you have any books that you would recommend to upcoming leaders out there?
Wow, there are so many great ones out there. One that I just finished reading was The Miracle Equation by Hal Elrod. Hal wrote a book called The Miracle Morning. He also has a podcast called The Miracle Equation. And it's a great book that talks about his journey, but all about mindset, not fighting reality, because that's where all pain and physical stress comes from. And also just, how you can make miracles. We've seen people in our lives that seem like whatever they touch, it turns into a miracle. If that's Steve Jobs or Richard Branson, or you could probably come up with some names right now. And I don't think it's an accident how they did that. And Hal Elrod in The Miracle Equation talks about that, of the clear focus, the faith, the will to do that, and then taking the action to follow that up. That was a powerful book for me. I listened to it twice, and then I actually bought the physical copy so that I could highlight it and actually study it and live it.
Awesome. Yeah, I like Hal Elrod's stuff. He's written some excellent books. I read The Miracle Morning, and he's co-authored a couple of books with other people about the miracle, something that I picked up as well that were really good. I think he had one, Miracle Morning for runners, and the Miracle Morning for authors, and they've all been really good.
He's a very insightful guy. And to me, as we talk about mentors, you can have mentors just from reading, right? You can have a mentor that you've never met. Winston Churchill is one of the people I consider a mentor. And he died before I was born, but he still has a huge impact on my life.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, there's so many authors that I've read that, gosh, it was like, they were talking just directly to me. So you mentioned before we got on the show that you had kind of some information for our guests that might help them out, and a special link. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're going to be offering and how people can find that and connect more with the things that you guys offer?
Well, John, I appreciate this, and going back to that, give. I share everything I know. It's not a secret. It's not a mystery. It's really just a process. It's a process we've refined. We teach. We execute it. It's our zone of excellence, but you can do it too. And so there's some things I'd like to share to help you get started, because I call myself the Chief Evangelist Officer for Interview Valet. And that's evangelizing the market of podcasting, evangelizing our company and our clients. So if you go back to interviewvalet.com/geek, there's a couple resources there. One is a checklist that we use for all of our clients, and I use before every interview. Checklists are written in blood. Make sure it's somebody else's blood. So the checklist is there. Also, I wrote a book, Podcast Guest Profits, How to Grow Your Business with the Targeted Interview Strategy. I give that book away. So you can get a free download on that. Just go to interviewvalet.com/geek. And then finally, I'll put all of my social media there and a calendar link. So if there's any of this that made sense to you, if you'd like to learn more about it or learn about how you could work with Interview Valet to get on podcasts to turn passive listeners into active visitors and engage leads, that'll be all on that page at interviewvalet.com/geek.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I'll link that up in the show notes, and people can get that at geekleader.com /Tom Schwab. And man, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And thanks for all the advice. And hopefully we've helped some people.
Well, John, I had a lot of fun here, and I hope we get to meet in real life soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks so much. Hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Tom Schwab. And if so, please leave a review in iTunes. I'm going to start reading some of the reviews on the show in the future. So if you want to hear your review, head on over to iTunes and leave a good one. That'd be awesome. Also, hit us up on Twitter. I'm always reading the tweets and retweeting things that come out. So you can find me at John Rauda and tweet at me there. That'd be fantastic. That's JOHNROUDA. And let us know how we're doing on the show. If there's things you want me to improve on, things you want to be different, you want different types of guests, or if you have a guest you want to suggest, I'm always open to finding out more about cool and interesting people that we can interview. That'd be fantastic. And also, don't forget about Tom's offer to go to interviewvalet.com/geek to learn more about how to be a better podcast guest and how to get onto people's shows and how to do a better job of marketing yourself in the community that we talked about. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and hit me up. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing to some of you guys and find out more about how I can better serve you guys in the future. So thanks a lot. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it.